For many people around the world, Roger Moore will always be remembered as the smooth and charming James Bond. He played the famous secret agent in 7 films between 1973 and 1985, becoming one of the longest-serving actors to take on the role. On screen, he looked relaxed, confident, and always in control. He delivered witty lines with a smile and handled danger as if it were a simple task. Audiences admired his elegance, humor, and calm personality. But behind the cameras, the real man was sometimes dealing with situations that were far from calm. In his memoir, My Word is My Bond, Moore spoke honestly about his life in Hollywood, including the friendships he valued and the co-stars who made his work more difficult than it needed to be. Before he became James Bond, Moore had already built a strong career in television. He gained fame through popular series like The Saint and The Persuaders, where his natural charm and sharp timing made him a favorite with viewers. These roles helped prepare him for the international spotlight that came with playing Bond. However, fame also brought him into close contact with some of the biggest and most complicated personalities in the entertainment industry. Hollywood in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s was filled with powerful stars, strong egos, and intense competition. While Moore was known for being polite and professional, he sometimes found himself working alongside people whose behavior surprised, annoyed, or even shocked him. One of the most complicated figures Moore wrote about was Peter Sellers. Sellers was a brilliant comedian, famous for his ability to transform himself into different characters. He was admired for his talent and creativity, but Moore described him as a man who hid behind many masks. According to Moore, Sellers struggled to show his true self. He often behaved in unpredictable ways, which made it difficult for others to form a close connection with him. Moore did not deny Sellers' talent, but he admitted that working with him could be confusing and frustrating. Sellers' mood could change quickly, and he sometimes seemed distant or lost in his own world. This created tension, even when they shared moments of humor. Another challenging working relationship came years later during the filming of the Bond movie A View to a Kill. In that film, Moore starred opposite Grace Jones, who played the powerful and intense character Mayday. Jones had a very strong personality, both on and off the screen. She brought energy and boldness to the set, but her style was very different from Moore's. He preferred quiet preparation and calm surroundings, especially between scenes. Jones, on the other hand, enjoyed loud music and a lively atmosphere. According to Moore, the noise from her dressing room sometimes disturbed him when he was trying to rest. While these issues might seem small, they added stress during long filming days. Moore admitted that he eventually became so frustrated that he confronted her directly, showing that even his patience had limits. Despite these conflicts, Moore rarely used harsh language when describing his co-stars. Instead, he often mixed humor with honesty. He understood that every actor has strengths and weaknesses. His memoir does not read like a book filled with anger. Rather, it feels like reflections from a man looking back at a long and colorful career. He respected talent, but he also believed in professionalism and basic courtesy. When those standards were not met, he noticed, as we look deeper into Moore's Hollywood journey, it becomes clear that his life was not only about glamour and success. Behind the tuxedo and the famous theme music, there were moments of tension, disappointment, and surprise. In the next part, we will explore more of the stars who crossed paths with Roger Moore, including powerful names like Frank Sinatra and Bette Davis, and examine how those encounters shaped his view of the industry he served for decades. As Roger Moore's fame continued to grow, he found himself surrounded not just by actors, but by legends. Hollywood in those decades was filled with larger-than-life personalities. These were people who carried power not only on screen, but also in real life. Moore, who was naturally polite and diplomatic, often handled these strong personalities with patience. However, there were moments when even he felt surprised, challenged, or unsettled. In his reflections, he made it clear that working in the film industry was not only about acting skills. It was also about managing egos, handling tension, and learning how to survive in a world where pride and competition were always present. One of the most powerful figures Moore interacted with was Frank Sinatra. Sinatra was not just a singer. He was an icon. His voice, style, and confidence made him one of the most influential entertainers of the 20th century. Moore first witnessed Sinatra's strong personality during an incident involving other major Hollywood names. Sinatra was fiercely loyal to his friends, and he did not hesitate to confront anyone he believed had insulted them. Moore observed how Sinatra stood up boldly during a public disagreement, showing courage and determination. That moment left a strong impression on him. He saw that behind Sinatra's smooth voice and relaxed image was a man who did not tolerate disrespect. Years later, Moore met Sinatra again in a calmer setting. This time, the atmosphere was more relaxed. Sinatra's young wife at the time, Mia Farrow, expressed her admiration for Moore's television show The Saint. To Moore's surprise, Sinatra agreed that they enjoyed watching it together. This softer moment showed Moore another side of Sinatra, one that was warm and appreciative. However, the topic of Sinatra's rumored connections to organized crime eventually surfaced. Instead of reacting angrily, Sinatra acknowledged the rumors without much concern. Moore noticed that Sinatra seemed almost comfortable with the mystery surrounding him. It added to his legend rather than damaging it. For Moore, this was another lesson in how Hollywood stars carefully shape their public image. Moore also shared memorable experiences with the legendary actress Bette Davis. Davis was known for her sharp tongue, strong opinions, and fearless attitude. When she approached Moore to compliment his performance in The Saint, he felt deeply honored. Receiving praise from such a respected actress boosted his confidence. Their friendship grew, and they even attended social events together. Moore admired her intelligence and honesty. Yet, he also noticed her demanding nature. At dinners, she sometimes gave strict instructions to her assistant in a tone that made Moore uncomfortable. It revealed a controlling side of her personality that was very different from her warm compliments. Davis was also famously involved in a long and bitter rivalry with Joan Crawford. The tension between these two Hollywood stars became one of the most talked-about feuds in film history. Moore observed that even after Crawford's death, Davis still carried resentment. When asked about her feelings, Davis made a comment suggesting that death does not change a person's character. For Moore, this was both surprising and slightly troubling. It showed how deeply emotions could remain, even many years later. Hollywood rivalries were not just publicity stories, they were real feelings that sometimes lasted a lifetime. Another interesting working relationship Moore experienced was with Tony Curtis during the television series The Persuaders. Curtis was charming and full of energy. He could light up a room with his personality. However, Moore also noticed that Curtis was extremely careful with money. He once invited Moore for Christmas dinner, and Moore jokingly recalled being surprised by how small the meal was. Curtis had a playful and sometimes mischievous sense of humor. He even shared questionable advice about handling romantic situations, advice that Moore listened to with amusement rather than seriousness. Despite these differences, Moore genuinely enjoyed working with Curtis. Their chemistry on screen helped make the show entertaining and memorable. Through all these encounters, one pattern becomes clear. Roger Moore did not present himself as a victim of difficult personalities. Instead, he described his experiences with a mix of humor, honesty, and reflection. He understood that strong personalities often came with strong talent. Hollywood was full of people who had fought hard to reach the top. Some became demanding. Some became defensive. Some built protective walls around themselves. Moore, with his calm nature, often acted as the steady presence in the room. By the time Roger Moore stepped into the role of James Bond, he was already an experienced actor who understood the pressures of fame and long filming schedules. However, the Bond films brought a different level of attention and expectation. Playing 007 meant working on large international sets, traveling across countries, and collaborating with actors from very different backgrounds. While Moore was known for his calm and humorous attitude, not every working relationship during those years was smooth. In fact, some moments tested his patience in ways that audiences never saw on screen. One of the most talked-about tensions during his Bond era involved Grace Jones, who played the powerful character Mayday in A View to a Kill. Jones was bold, confident, and completely comfortable expressing herself. She had a strong artistic personality and did not try to adjust her style to fit others. Moore, on the other hand, preferred a more traditional and structured working environment. He liked punctuality, quiet preparation, and a certain order on set. These differences created friction. According to Moore, Jones often played loud music in her dressing room, which was next to his. After long hours of filming action scenes, he wanted silence to relax and review his lines. The constant noise irritated him, and after repeated polite requests, he eventually confronted her directly. The conflict did not end there. Moore also mentioned that some of his leading ladies, including Jones, frequently used filming breaks to adjust their appearance. While there is nothing unusual about actors checking their makeup, Moore felt that the repeated delays sometimes slowed down the production. In a moment of frustration, he once hid some makeup items as a joke, hoping to speed things up. The attempt failed because replacements were easily available, but the story showed how irritated he had become. Despite these clashes, Moore still acknowledged Jones' talent and screen presence. Their disagreements were more about personality differences than deep hatred. Still, it proved that even a seasoned professional like Moore could feel pushed beyond his comfort zone. Another complicated relationship during the Bond years involved Hervé Villechaize, who played the character Nick Nack in The Man with the Golden Gun. Villechaize was known for his bold personality and outspoken nature. According to Moore's recollections, the actor's behavior sometimes made the work environment uncomfortable. Moore described moments when Villechaize crossed personal boundaries, including unwanted physical contact and inappropriate comments. Moore once responded sharply when he felt his space was not respected. Although his reaction may sound harsh, he explained that it came from frustration after repeated incidents. Villechaize's life outside the film set was also filled with extremes. He openly spoke about his romantic adventures and often boasted about his encounters with women. Moore found this behavior excessive and difficult to tolerate. While Moore valued humor and light conversation, he preferred dignity and restraint. The contrast between their personalities created tension during filming. Moore tried to remain professional, but he admitted that the situation tested him. Years later, he reflected on these events with a mixture of honesty and sadness, especially knowing that Villechaize's life ended tragically. Beyond these specific conflicts, Moore faced the general pressures that came with carrying such a famous franchise. By the mid-1980s, he was older than many previous Bond actors had been. Action scenes became more physically demanding, and critics sometimes questioned whether he was too old for the role. While he maintained his signature charm, he was aware that expectations were rising. This added another layer of stress behind the scenes. Even when disagreements happened, he felt responsible for maintaining a respectful atmosphere because he represented the franchise. What stands out most in Moore's reflections is that he rarely used harsh words without explanation. He tried to understand why others behaved the way they did. He recognized that fame, insecurity, and personal struggles often influenced people's actions. While he sometimes felt irritated, he did not hold lifelong grudges. Instead, he told these stories as lessons about the complexity of human behavior in high-pressure environments. While some of Roger Moore's stories revealed tension and frustration, many others showed deep friendship, loyalty, and respect. Hollywood was not only a place of rivalry and ego. It was also a world where strong bonds were formed through shared experiences. Long shooting schedules, travel across continents, and the pressure of public life often created friendships that lasted decades. For Roger Moore, one of the most meaningful relationships he described was with Sammy Davis Jr. Their connection reflected not conflict, but admiration and warmth. Sammy Davis Jr. was a performer of extraordinary talent. He could sing, dance, act, and entertain with unmatched energy. He was part of the famous Rat Pack and performed alongside some of the biggest names in entertainment. Yet behind the bright lights, he also faced serious personal struggles. As a Black Jewish entertainer in mid-20th century America, Davis experienced discrimination and prejudice. Instead of allowing bitterness to control him, he often responded with humor. Moore admired this quality deeply. He respected Davis not only for his talent, but also for his resilience. Moore often remembered how Davis would visit film sets simply because he loved being around the creative process. During the filming of television shows in earlier years, Davis would practice skills like fast pistol drawing and gun twirling just for fun. He approached everything with enthusiasm. At social gatherings, he could lighten any atmosphere with jokes, sometimes even making fun of himself to make others comfortable. Moore once recalled Davis joking openly about the difficulties he faced because of his race, religion, and physical appearance. It was not self-hate, it was strength expressed through laughter. Their final meeting left a deep emotional impact on Moore. When Davis became seriously ill with throat cancer, doctors suggested surgery that could extend his life but would remove his ability to speak and sing. For a man whose voice was central to his identity, that decision was painful. Davis chose to keep his voice, even though it reduced his chances of survival. Moore saw this as an act of courage. When he visited him near the end of his life, he noticed how physically weak Davis had become, yet his spirit remained strong. That moment reminded Moore that behind fame and glamour, all entertainers are human beings facing the same fears and decisions as anyone else. Looking back on his entire career, Moore's stories about difficult co-stars were only one part of a much larger picture. Yes, he experienced tension with personalities like Grace Jones and Hervé Villechaize. Yes, he observed the sharp edges of Hollywood legends like Bette Davis and the commanding presence of Frank Sinatra. But he also built friendships that lasted for years. He laughed, traveled, and shared unforgettable moments with people who understood the unusual life of a star. Moore's ability to reflect on both conflict and friendship with balance is what makes his memoir powerful. He did not try to present himself as perfect. He admitted when he felt irritated or offended. He shared stories that showed his own flaws as well as those of others. At the same time, he avoided cruelty. Even when describing uncomfortable moments, he often included humor. This approach allowed readers to see Hollywood not as a simple world of heroes and villains, but as a complex environment filled with real emotions. In the end, Roger Moore's legacy goes far beyond the tuxedo of James Bond. He was not just a suave secret agent on screen. He was a man who navigated decades of fame with grace, patience, and honesty. His humanitarian work as a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador showed another important side of his character. He used his fame to raise awareness for children in need around the world. That work may not have received the same dramatic headlines as Hollywood conflicts, but it reflected his true values. When he passed away in 2017, fans remembered him for his charm and humor. Yet those who read his reflections understand that his life was filled with both bright moments and difficult challenges. The co-stars who tested his patience became part of his story, but they did not define it. Instead, they highlighted the strength of his character. In a world full of strong personalities and fragile egos, Roger Moore remained steady, thoughtful, and ultimately kind, a quality that may be rarer than any secret agent skill. As the years passed, Roger Moore began to feel the weight of time in a role that demanded youth, strength, and constant energy. Playing James Bond was not simply about wearing a tuxedo and delivering clever lines. It required intense action scenes, long filming hours, and a physical presence that matched the image of an unstoppable secret agent. By the early 1980s, Moore was older than most previous actors who had played Bond. Critics began to question whether he was still the right fit for the character. Some reviews suggested he looked too mature for the demanding role. While Moore handled public criticism with humor, he privately understood that these comments carried truth. Aging in Hollywood can be difficult, especially for actors known for physical roles. Moore once admitted that he sometimes felt self-conscious performing romantic scenes opposite much younger actresses. Although he maintained his trademark charm, he was aware of the age difference. This awareness did not make him bitter, but it made him reflective. He understood that every actor must eventually step aside to allow a new generation to take over. When he finally retired from the Bond role after A View to a Kill, he did so with acceptance rather than anger. He believed it was better to leave before the audience completely lost faith. The Bond franchise itself was evolving. After Moore stepped down, The role was passed to Timothy Dalton, who brought a darker and more serious tone to the character. Moore's Bond had been playful, witty, and sometimes lighthearted. Dalton's version shifted toward realism and intensity. Moore never expressed resentment about this change. Instead, he acknowledged that each actor brings something unique. He understood that the character of Bond must adapt to different times and audiences. Outside of the Bond films, Moore's life also included challenges that the public rarely saw. He faced health issues over the years, including serious illnesses that required surgery and recovery time. These experiences gave him a deeper appreciation for life. They also strengthened his connection to humanitarian work. His involvement with UNICEF became more than a public duty. It became a personal mission. Traveling to developing countries and meeting children living in poverty changed his perspective. He often said that those experiences were more meaningful than any film premiere or red carpet event. Looking back at his conflicts with co-stars, Moore seemed to view them with distance and maturity. What once felt irritating or frustrating became stories he could tell with a smile. He recognized that actors are often under extreme pressure. Long hours, public scrutiny, and personal struggles can bring out difficult behavior. When he described moments of tension with figures like Grace Jones or Hervé Villechaize, he did so with context. He did not deny his frustration, but he also did not exaggerate. Moore's reflections also reveal something important about fame itself. Hollywood often creates larger-than-life images, but behind every legend is a human being. He saw this clearly in his meetings with powerful personalities such as Frank Sinatra and Bette Davis. Both were icons, yet both had insecurities, tempers, and personal struggles. Moore understood that admiration and disappointment can exist at the same time. A person can be talented, yet difficult. They can be generous in one moment and demanding in another. As he grew older, Moore's tone became softer. He focused more on gratitude than grievance. He often emphasized how lucky he felt to have worked in an industry that allowed him to travel the world and meet extraordinary individuals. Even the conflicts became part of his learning process. They taught him patience and perspective. In the final years of his life, Moore remained active in charity work and public appearances. He continued to attend events related to the Bond franchise and enjoyed meeting fans who grew up watching his films. His humor never disappeared. Even when discussing aging, he joked about his wrinkles and gray hair. That ability to laugh at himself was one of his greatest strengths. Ultimately, Roger Moore's story is not just about the co-stars who tested his patience. It is about resilience, professionalism, and growth. It is about understanding that behind every glamorous film set are real emotions and complex personalities. His life shows that success is not measured only by fame or box office numbers, but also by the grace with which one handles both admiration and conflict. As the final chapters of his life unfolded, Roger Moore seemed less interested in revisiting arguments or tensions and more focused on gratitude. The stories about co-stars who tested his patience became small pieces of a much larger journey. When people asked him about disagreements with personalities like Grace Jones or difficult moments with Hervé Villechaize, he did not respond with anger. Instead, he often smiled and told the story with gentle humor. Time had softened the sharp edges of those experiences. What once felt like stress became part of the colorful history of a long career. Moore understood something important about the entertainment industry. Strong personalities are often connected to strong talent. Hollywood has always been a place where confidence is necessary for survival. Actors compete for roles, fight to protect their public image, and live under constant judgment. In that environment, disagreements are almost unavoidable. Moore admitted that he sometimes felt annoyed or uncomfortable, but he also recognized that he was not perfect either. He believed that everyone carries their own struggles, fears, and insecurities. This balanced way of thinking allowed him to move forward without carrying resentment. His reflections on icons like Frank Sinatra and Bette Davis show how deeply he understood